It was just another late shift, the clock striking 11 p.m. as I stepped out of work, exhausted but glad to be heading home. The familiar 45-minute drive was something I always looked forward to. It was my quiet time, a soothing ritual where I could unwind, lost in my thoughts, with the hum of the engine and the open road stretching ahead. The first half of the journey was uneventful. As usual, the city streets faded into the distance, replaced by quieter roads and darker skies. I rolled down the window slightly, letting the crisp night air fill the car. The road leading to my house was a long, winding stretch that cut through a dense forest. It was peaceful most of the time, though admittedly eerie at night, with only the faint glow of my headlights illuminating the way. About 20 minutes from home, the fog began to roll in. It wasn't uncommon in this area, but tonight it was heavier than usual. The mist clung to the road, reducing visibility to only a few feet. I slowed down, squinting to make out the faint outlines of the trees flanking the road. That's when I saw it, a small blinking light flickering through the fog. At first, I thought it was a hazard light, maybe a car stalled up ahead. I eased off the gas, trying to gauge its distance. But before I could get a clear view, the light went out, vanishing into the thick fog. My pulse quickened as an uneasy feeling settled over me. Slowing to about 20 miles per hour, I crept forward cautiously. Out of nowhere, a small car shot out from the side of the road, swerving into my lane and coming to an abrupt stop directly in front of me. There was no time to react. I slammed on the brakes, but the slick road worked against me, and my car tapped their rear bumper with a jarring thud. For a moment, I just sat there, stunned. The collision wasn't severe, but it had happened so suddenly, so inexplicably, that it left me disoriented. Shaking it off, I put my car in park and stepped out. The air was heavy with mist, and the scene before me felt surreal. The car ahead was an old, battered sedan, its paint peeling and headlights completely off. I stood by my car, expecting the driver to get out. I could see someone moving in the driver's seat, their silhouette barely visible through the fogged-up windows. It took them an uncomfortably long time to step out. When they finally did, I felt a chill that had nothing to do with the weather. The man was large, broad-shouldered, and middle-aged, his face shadowed under the dim moonlight. His movements were deliberate, almost sluggish, as he approached me. Something about him felt off. He didn't meet my gaze, instead glancing around nervously, his eyes darting to the forest lining the road. "Everything okay?" I asked, trying to keep my voice steady. "You pulled out pretty quick?" He mumbled something I couldn't quite catch, his gaze never settling on me. I repeated myself, louder this time, but he only muttered a vague apology, his tone devoid of sincerity. The unease I'd felt earlier was now a full-blown warning in my gut. "There's no real damage," I said, inching toward my car. "I think we're good here." As I reached for the door, he raised a hand. "Wait!" His voice was sharper now, more commanding. He gestured toward his car. "I need to check for damage." Reluctantly, I stepped back, watching as he circled his car. But instead of focusing on the rear bumper, the only part of the car that could have been affected, he began inspecting the passenger side, his movements slow and deliberate. That's when I saw it. The faint outline of a figure shifting in the back seat. My heart leapt into my throat as the back door creaked open, and another man began stepping out. He was just as large as the first, if not larger, and his presence confirmed what my instincts had been screaming all along. This wasn't just an accident. I didn't think. I acted. Throwing myself into the driver's seat, I slammed the door and locked it in one fluid motion. The two men were at my windows now, waving their arms and shouting for me to stop. One of them even tried the handle, but I didn't wait to find out what they wanted. Jamming the car into drive, I veered onto the shoulder and sped past them, my tires kicking up gravel as I tore down the road. In my rearview mirror, I saw their Car's headlights flicker on, cutting through the fog. For a few agonizing moments, they followed, their lights closing the distance. Then, just as suddenly as they had appeared, they turned off their lights and vanished into the mist. I didn't stop until I reached a gas station a few miles from home. Parking under the bright lights, I sat there for what felt like hours, my hands gripping the steering wheel, my mind racing with what-ifs. What if I hadn't gotten back in my car in time? What if I hadn't noticed the second man? And worst of all, what if they were still out there, waiting for their next unsuspecting victim? I sat there in the gas station parking lot, the fluorescent lights humming softly above me. The clock on my dashboard read 12:15 a.m., but time felt meaningless. My pulse hadn't settled, and my hands trembled as I reached for my phone. Calling. The cops seemed logical, but what could I even report? There hadn't been a crime, just an unsettling encounter that could have been far worse. Finally, I decided to make the rest of the drive home. I took the long way around, avoiding the forest road altogether. The thought of passing that spot again sent shivers down my spine. As I drove, my eyes darted constantly to the rearview mirror, scanning for headlights, for any sign of the battered sedan, but the road remained eerily empty. When I pulled into my driveway, I sat in the car for a long moment, staring at the darkened windows of my house. The safety of home didn't feel so certain anymore. I double-checked the locks on every door and window before finally collapsing into bed, though sleep didn't come easily. Over the following weeks, I couldn't shake the memory of that night. I found myself obsessively checking local news for reports of strange activity, but there was nothing. No missing persons, no accidents on that road, no arrests. It was as if the two men had disappeared into thin air. But the paranoia stayed. Every time I drove home late, I kept my eyes peeled for flickering lights in the fog or cars lurking too close behind. I installed a dash cam and started carrying pepper spray in my car. Rational or not, I couldn't ignore the feeling that I'd narrowly escaped something far worse than a simple fender bender. I still don't know what they wanted that night. Money? My car? Something even more sinister? All I know is that I'll never let my guard down again. Not on that road, not anywhere. I had been on the road for over 8 hours, my delivery complete, and the miles stretching endlessly ahead of me. It was past 1 a.m. and the highway was nearly deserted, save for the occasional headlights of another semi or a lone car speeding. Into the night. I planned to stop at a truck rest area about 40 miles up the road. The night felt heavier than usual. The highway was flanked by dense woods on either side, their shadows stretching long and dark under the pale moonlight. The hum of my truck's engine was the only sound, a monotonous drone that usually comforted me, but tonight it felt oppressive. That's when I noticed it, a pair of headlights in my side mirror. At first, I thought nothing of it. Cars pass us truckers all the time, their impatience pushing them to swerve around us at breakneck speeds. But this car didn't pass. It stayed behind me, its lights glaring too close for comfort. Probably some idiot who doesn't know how to drive, I muttered to myself. But as the minutes dragged on, the car didn't waver. It kept its position, trailing me like a predator stalking its prey. Unease crept in, but I pushed it down. I had dealt with strange drivers before. It came with the territory. Still, something about this felt different. The car wasn't just tailgating. It was matching my every move. When I finally pulled into the truck stop, I felt a wave of relief. The rest area was well lit, with a few other trucks parked in neat rows. Surely this would deter whoever was behind me. But as I maneuvered my rig into a spot, the car followed, pulling up just a few feet behind my trailer. I killed the engine and climbed down from the cab, my boots hitting the asphalt with a solid thud. The car was an old, beat-up sedan, its paint peeling in places. The windows were tinted, too dark to see who was inside. "Can I help you?" I called out, keeping my tone firm. The car didn't respond. It just sat there, its engine idling. After a moment, the headlights turned off, plunging the area behind my truck into darkness. My unease grew into something sharper, something more urgent. I decided to let it go. Maybe it was just some weirdo who'd decided to stop here by coincidence. Climbing back into my truck, I locked the doors and settled in for the night. But I didn't sleep. Not really. I sat there, staring at my mirrors, watching for any sign of movement. 2 hours later, I was jolted awake by a loud, metallic bang. It came from the back of my trailer. My heart pounded as I sat up, peering into the side mirror. At first, I saw nothing, just the faint glow of the truck stoplights reflecting off the other rigs. Then, a shadow shifted. Someone was at the rear of my trailer. I grabbed the knife I kept in the console and slipped quietly out of the cab, leaving the door slightly ajar. Staying low, I crept along the side of the truck, my footsteps silent against the asphalt. When I reached the back, I saw him. A man in a dark hoodie was crouched by the trailer's doors, a crowbar in hand. My stomach tightened as I realized he wasn't alone. Another figure stood near the sedan, acting as a lookout. "Hey!" I shouted, my voice cutting through the night like a whip. The man with the crowbar froze for a split second before bolting toward the car. The lookout jumped into the driver's seat, and within seconds, the sedan roared to life, its tires screeching as it sped out of the lot. I stood there, knife in hand, heart racing as I watched their taillights disappear into the night. When I inspected the trailer, I found fresh scratches around the lock, evidence of how close they had come. Thankfully, the trailer was empty, the delivery long since unloaded. But the thought of what could have happened if I hadn't woken up in time kept me awake for the rest of the night. I reported the incident to the truck stop manager, but there wasn't much they could do. The cameras didn't capture anything useful, and the car was long gone. Even now, every time I hear a noise in the night or spot a car following too close, my mind goes back to that moment. Being alone on the road, far from help, makes you realize how vulnerable you really are. That night, I learned that monsters don't always lurk in the dark. They can hide behind headlights, trailing just close enough to remind you they're there.